Hello, and welcome to the May Soul Shift coaching and debrief session. This is where I coach you. I respond to your questions about our work together and give you, my best perspective on what's on your mind. As always, I want to remind you that what I offer you is really just that. It's my best wisdom based on my experience. But you should always trust your intuition. If I give you guidance and it doesn't fully resonate with you, kind of take what works and leave the rest. And I share that just because there's some new members and I want to make sure everybody understands that, this isn't really part of the curriculum per se. This is just my effort to support you if you've got big questions based on the things that we've been learning together. And I want to thank you for the questions that you submitted. As always, they're fantastic. And a lot of you give me the feedback that these coaching sessions are some of your favorite part of Soul Shift, and that really makes my heart happy. I hope it is useful for you. I hope it gives you something to kind of chew on outside of class. And a lot of you say that you really like that it's audio because there isn't sort of a visual to distract you. So you can listen to it on the way to work or whenever fits into your schedule. So thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it. We'll start with MJ. She says, Hola, amor. In doing our worksheets, I discovered my masculine and feminine are both in Leo, but my liminal in Neptune is in Scorpio. And I just don't know what that means to me and how to balance the three. So I'm going to clarify, MJ. Thank you for your question, by the way. You mean Mars and Venus, right? When you say masculine and feminine in your chart. Excuse me, because that's what I'm assuming. So your Mars and Venus are in Leo, and then your Neptune's in Scorpio. And one of the things I want to remind you is Mars and Venus in your chart are not the ultimate representation or any kind of fixed representation of how your masculine and your feminine show up. They are clues to how you operate. But they're not assignments to you, like this is who you are as a woman, this is who you are as a man, or this is how your feminine is, no matter if you're male or female, right? Because we all have feminine and masculine no matter what body parts we came in with, right? So this is not hard and fast. I just want to open your mind a little bit, just because I really don't want any of you to start to believe that, okay, so my Mars is in Leo, so that means, that's my masculine side. My masculine energy line is Leo. Because it's such a dance, your astrological chart. When you think about it, there's so many different aspects of the chart that also have connections, right? Synchronicities between them. And so I don't want you to think you have to take certain things out of context, like Mars is in Leo, so that means this. It's like there's also a dance between Mars and Venus and your moon and your rising and your sun and your Neptune and your and all of the placements, right? Your north node and your south node, and because what you're here to do dances with who you are, right? So, and I say that just as a caveat because the guidance I'm going to give you here is, first of all, helicopter up a little bit, because it's not as polarizing as it may seem. Like, oh, I'm all Leo, but then I've got this liminal aspect to me, or this in-between place, or I think of Neptune as the space of dreams in your chart. The places where you can go to find the in-between, right? It isn't black or white, your Neptune. It shows you where you're gray in your chart. So for me, that Neptune in Scorpio is really an opportunity for transformation and to get you out of that heavy fire that dominates your chart through your Mars and your Venus. And so having your masculine and feminine both in a fixed fire sign is really challenging sometimes, but it's balanced by that Neptune is Scorpio. You don't have to balance them. You're asking how to balance them, but I would offer you back a different answer, which is it's already balanced, right? The Scorpio, that water energy, will create a natural sort of yin yang in your field. And remember, Scorpio governs transformation, right? Death and rebirth cycles. And so just on the face of it, with just these three pieces of information, but not thinking about any of the other factors, which, like I said, is kind of fallacious, because you do need to think about all the factors in unison together. But just pulling these three out, what I would say is your your masculine and feminine, your Mars and Venus probably go through iterations in your life. And it's probably because that Neptune Scorpio is going to create cycles around it. So it may be that the Mars is more pronounced at certain times, or the Venus is more pronounced at certain times, according to those cycles and rhythms in your life. And like I said, I think that Neptune Scorpio is going to be a balancing force in and of itself without you having to do anything to balance them. Yeah. So I hope that's helpful for you. Brittany said or asked, my question is more like tips on releasing manifestations to the cosmos. I notice that when I get close to a major manifestation, I can't stop thinking about it. I feel like it slows down or potentially even stops the process entirely. How can I work with this energy in a positive and effective way? You betcha, girl. Well, here's my thinking on this, and would love your feedback, because this is something that I have observed especially over the last 5 or 10 years, and it was nothing I was ever taught, so it could be not useful. It's really just an observation based on my own life. I have noticed that the universe prefers intention to expectation. I have noticed that the universe resists expectation. That's why when I say, if I'm talking to somebody and I'm all excited about a trip we're going to take, I'll always say, I'm looking forward to that. But I don't say I'll be there. I've started to curve my language a little bit because I've just noticed the universe doesn't like us to expect things. There's a difference between making a wish and making a demand. Does that make sense? I feel like intentions are wishes, and I feel like expectations are demands. So, and I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but when you say, I can't stop thinking about it, and then it slows down, it's like, it depends on how you're thinking about it. Sometimes we get forceful, we get focused, we get sort of too intense. And I'm going to talk about this in the manifestation class too. There is a moment in everyone's manifestation process where you have to let it go. And I say, give it to God. Give it to your creator. You have to let it go and give it to the winds. And part of that process is trusting that the universe is working diligently on your behalf. I look at the universe like that, as if it's constantly colluding to support me. So I oftentimes completely forget my intentions. That's why I write them down, because otherwise I would forget them. Like, oh yeah, I wanted that. So I don't know if my example helps you, Brittany. I hope it does, but you might want to think more about just being a little bit more, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Allowing for serendipity and then just playing a little bit. And because when we take things too seriously, we can lock them down. It's like dating somebody and then calling them every 5 minutes. It's like, hey, are you thinking about me? How about now? Are you thinking about me? How about now? Are you thinking about me? And it's like, geez, I am thinking about you, and I'm thinking about how I wish you would leave me alone, right? So versus dating somebody and like letting them call you, it's like, oh yeah, that's more attractive energetically, right? Because we're not trying to control. So anyway, hope that's helpful for you. Julie said, I'd love to learn how to do a prosperity bowl, as it sounds a lot more freeform than a grid. I also want to say thank you. You're very, very, very welcome. She was appreciative of my reading for her this week. I loved reading for you. I'm not familiar per se with the idea of a prosperity bowl. What I have done and what they do in feng shui is they make jars, kind of like the honey jars, but they don't necessarily do honey in them. But they and then they place that jar in the southeast corner of the house. And the jar, every time I've seen this done in feng shui practice, they use like a ginger jar. Do you know what those are? They're kind of like pottery. They're super pretty. I don't own one, but I've always admired them. I had a chance to get one in Mexico like 20 years ago. It was such a beautiful, it was the Mexican pottery, and it was this gorgeous ginger jar, and it was just a little too expensive at the time. It's one of those things like I often look back and think I should have just bought it. So if you'd like to do this, it's definitely something that we could consider as a craft for Soul Shift. It would take me time to get supplies and stuff to be able to teach that. But you could build your own. And basically, it's just putting meaningful items into the jar and placing it appropriately, which is the southeast corner, which is the corner of wealth and prosperity. So let me know if you want more information, more guidance, and obviously I'll be happy to do that. Brooke Kitchens. Hi, Athena. I've been noticing a lot more often that when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm not recognizing myself. Isn't that interesting? She said, it's happened before, but not to this extent. I'm wondering if this was a cause from the effect of alchemizing. It sure is, Brooke, in my experience. I mean, first of all, and we haven't talked about this as a collective either in a long time. In sabbatical, we talked about it eons ago, but it's probably good to talk about it, that at least for me and for quite a few people I know, our shadows have a look. You know what I mean? When I'm in shadow phase, and I actually really like it, because my shadow is a little edgy. She's I notice it in the expressions on my face sometimes, because she's edgy and not afraid, and she's exciting, kind of. You know what I mean? And so there's an attractiveness in that energy that when I'm more in shadow than in light, I see it on my face. I can even see it in photographs at different times. I can say, oh, I was kind of doing a lot of shadow work then, because I can see the difference in the expression. There's a lot of shape-shifting that happens. If you go back and watch my videos from 9-10 years ago, I mean, I look really different, and nothing's changed. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I guess is my short answer to you. It sure can be. I mean, energy is real, and it manifests in the material. And the opposite can be true, where people, not necessarily in the context of alchemy, but when people are in a really tough part of their lives, or they're being abused, or they've been through a lot of stuff, you can see that on their face too, right? So, yeah, I think alchemy is the ultimate anti-aging, routine. Soul work takes, years off. When you do really deep cleansing of your field, whether it's through plant medicine or alchemical work or shamanic work or whatever it is, I think it turns back the clock. I really do. Yasmina kind of alluded to that a little bit yesterday too, when I was with her. Sylvie Brewster, I'm doing the masculine and feminine worksheets. I realized in private I'm all feminine, and at work I have to be all masculine. It's very common for a lot of people. I'm struggling with balancing them in two very different environments. Well, remember too, Sylvie, that most of us are out of balance all the time, right? The challenge you face, and I get it, because I faced the same challenge when I was, especially in corporate. It was just, the only thing that got rewarded was the masculine, right? Direct, focused, linear, outcome-oriented. But most of us can't live there because we're all feminine and masculine, and that's a very dry space. It's like you need the feminine kind of lush, nurturing warmth there that isn't necessarily focused on the outcome, that can be focused on the process. However, one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of my clients is they're finding ways, even very subtle ways, to feminize the masculine in the workplace. And in some cases, they get very rewarded for it. It has to be authentic to who they are. And you have to be careful, right? Because that's not too much too soon. But, I worked a lot of magic into my coaching. I didn't call it magic. But when I was teaching people about how to achieve their goals and how to, increase their profits in their company or whatever, what I was doing really was talking to them about intention setting and manifestation, right? But I just couched it in coaching speak. And so my coaching was very different from other people's because it was holistic, but it didn't come in a holistic wrapper. It came in a standard traditional wrapper. And that was my way of balancing. For you, it might look different, but just know that balance is less of a goal for me personally than alignment. I'm very masculine as a person, so I can be 75-25 masculine, feminine, and that's a comfort zone for me. And it's a comfort zone for everybody who knows me too, because if I show up too feminine, sometimes people are like, "Are you okay?" Because I'm usually just in my waking life. I'm very organized. I'm very structured. I'm very type A and process oriented, but definitely outcome oriented as well. I move fast, I think fast, I talk fast, you know what I mean? So when I slow down and it's more syrupy and I take my time and I miss a deadline or something, it's just like people are like, "Are you okay?" So hopefully somewhere in that sharing is useful wisdom for you too. Joyce says, "I'm wondering how to gently transition change. I no longer will be teaching and have trauma fear around this change." Gently transition change is her question. How do we do that? The way I do it, Joy, because I've made that transition, I've made a bunch of transitions, and the number one thing I ask myself is, what excites you about this next step? You're in a fear place, right? I will no longer be teaching. I have trauma fear around this change. You have to reframe the change and figure out something about it that gets you excited, because this change wouldn't be happening unless it was in line with your highest good. If you trust this, right? I mean, obviously, if what I'm saying, you're like, "Oh, that's BS," like, then, it won't work. But in my life, I look and I say, most change is precipitated by an energetic shift that's bringing me into alignment. And so in order to gently transition through change and experience grace, we have to dream into it and see what's in there that's actually a gift. Otherwise, you're likely to sabotage yourself, right? Because if we fear something going into it, what's the likelihood of success? And I'm happy to continue that conversation too in next month's coaching if you have additional questions. Okay, April Trent. What are some tips, techniques for healing the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine? The most important thing, April, is awareness, right? When you're in that place of the wounded masculine, when you're in that place of the wounded feminine, the awareness of that will help you become aware of how your behavior is manifesting, because it's different for everybody. So I would need to know more about how your wounded masculine is showing up, or how your wounded feminine is showing up, or how you're seeing examples of this, because it's different for everybody. But at the highest level to coach you, awareness is the key. Once you know, and you'll learn just by becoming aware how it starts to manifest. And you can become conscious of the fact, like, oh, I'm in this space, I need to navigate. And just like I was saying to Sylvie, the goal is alignment. The goal is to be in a place of productive, functional masculine and productive, functional feminine, right? And so making sure that you're living into, to the extent that you can, and we all falter and fail at times, right? Because we're human. But to the extent that you can, making sure that you're embodying the highest possible frequency of the masculine and the feminine. So if you find yourself getting into bullying behaviors, or if you find yourself, dealing with anger and frustration and resentment on an extreme scale, right, then we know that we're getting into some of these patterns and we have to make our way through it. Yeah, it's a great question. Maribel Garcia, how do I bring in more of the feminine? So this might actually be a response to April as well. She said, my Mars, Venus, Sun are all in Aries, my Moon, Scorpio, Neptune, Sagittarius. I feel like a hermit most of the time. I enjoy being by myself. There's a lot of, keep in mind, all of that Aries energy. Aries likes to be a solo performer, right? Aries feels like it has to be a solo performer, because if Aries brings on anybody else to help, they're not going to do it as well as they would. So Aries often tries to go it alone. And not because they're too prideful. They don't want to ask for help. They just don't think the help's going to be useful, right? So one of the ways to create polarity, right, which is to bring in the yin to the yang of Aries, is to look across the wheel. Your opposite sign is Libra, right? So you may want to consider to bring in that polarity and to create some alignment there, ultimately to balance those two sides in service of alignment. You may want to think about what it would mean to lean more into Libra qualities when you're in that high Aries mode. Libra creates community, connection, harmony. Libra processes through art, and by creating beauty, because Libra is so associated with Venus, right? Aries creates beauty by execution, right? Because it's associated with Mars. So it just wants to get something done. And by being of quick service, accurate service, Mars and Aries tend to see themselves as being fruitful, right? Or productive. But for a Libra, what's productivity is quite different. Now, this could drive you absolutely bonkers, honestly. I mean, I think most Aries, if they had to live in a Libra body, would just like eject, right? Like, I'm not doing that. I do not need all these people around. I do not need to have a bunch of conversations about this. Like, you're wasting my time. But it also might be a really powerful learning opportunity for you. Be a Libra for a day, right? Do you have Libra in your chart? Cynthia Allred, my Mars and Venus are Aquarius in the 2nd house. My Neptune is Scorpio in the 12th house. My moon sign is also in Scorpio. Is all that balancing a good thing? One thing I want to tell you guys is I do love trying to answer your astrological questions. Some of the questions you're asking, though, like if I was to do a full analysis, I would need your full natal chart, and it would be about an hour just on that. So I want to encourage some of you, you can definitely continue to ask high-level astrological questions here in coaching. But I think some of you, like Cynthia, for example, might benefit from a full astrological review by an astrologer. I just had mine done. I try to do it once a year. It actually was 2 years before I had this last one done in December, I think. And you can find great astrologers who don't charge exorbitant fees. Some of them charge exorbitant fees. I consider exorbitant to be over $200 an hour. I have a general rule in my life. I really don't like to pay anyone over $200 or $250 an hour. There's a lot of people in the metaphysical space who charge more than that. I've never found it to be worthwhile. So just as like a bearing on what things cost, for a good astrologer, you should be able to find somebody in that $200 or $250 range. But for what I would give you as guidance, just high level here in the context of our coaching questions is, Aquarius is a fixed sign, Scorpio is a fixed sign. That fixed energy likes the extremes. It really does. Have you noticed that? I'm fixed fire, and I like the extremes. I'm balanced out by a Sag moon, which is mutable. So that kind of keeps me from getting too stuck in my own patterns. But keep in mind, Cynthia, balance looks different for everybody. And some people like you with a lot of fixed energy in your chart may need to go to those extremes. Think of a pendulum swinging wildly right back and forth in order to finally arrive at center, at that place of alignment. So I think it's good not to resist this kind of polarity in your chart and this kind of fixed energy, because it can actually, in that swinging back and forth, can actually land you back in a very centered place. Okay, Veronica asked, can you turn quartz points on a grid toward center and toward the outside without having to reactivate if the intention is accurate, or do you need to reactivate? I have turned them without reactivating. I think it's better to reactivate. I don't think you have to take the grid apart, though. Just make sure you turn them clockwise one by one, and you don't lift them more than 12 inches away from the grid, which would take them out of the web. But once you turn them, it does change the geometry, the energetic geometry, right? So I think activating again is not a bad thing. Andrea Rodriguez, I would like to know your view of asexuality. This is a great question too. I'm asexual, and I've always wondered if it's a sign of a blocked energy in my sacral chakra. I'll tell you, Andrea, I don't think it is. But I tend to see asexuality. I believe in an LGBTQIA, which includes intersex and asexual, as categories of identification. So I think part of it is that's my worldview. I have people in my life who are asexual, and it is both their internal desire and their external intention, right? I don't think who we are is a blockage. Does that make sense? Now, having said that, I'm sure there are some of you who might listen to that and go, I disagree, you know what I mean? Like, But as a human being and as somebody who is part of the LGBTQIA community, right, as a bisexual person, I don't think that my bisexuality is an energy blockage. I think it's part of who I am as a human being. For me, a blockage is something that is inhibiting your progress because there is a lack of energy flow. For some people, they're not asexual, but they've got a loss of desire or interest. So in some people, can it be a blockage? Maybe. But if it's a category of identification and it's the core of who you are, I don't see that as a blockage. Now, if you were to tell me, no, I definitely, I'm definitely this other category. I'm experiencing a loss of desire. I don't know if it's hormonal or energetic. Could we look at it? Is there a sacral chakra blockage? Maybe, right? But from the way you're framing your question, I am asexual. Is that a block? Who you are can't be a block. I hope that's helpful for you. Dasha said, Dear Athena, I need help with not holding on to other people's energies when I'm doing energy healing for them. Hello. She said, I have so many things in place and already like pan protection and wearing my smoky quartz, shungite copper every day, smudging, clearing. It still feels like a lot of other people's energy is stuck in my physical body. Is there anything more I can do? Mwah. She gave me a big hug and a kiss. It's tough. And I'll tell you right now, it's tougher than ever. My 2 cents, okay? I have never felt more of other people's energy in my field before. Even though we've been through a pandemic where we've been socially distanced, I don't think we're energetically distanced. And so I have had to really focus on being in my own energy field. The main thing when people tell me they're overwhelmed energetically, do you know what I find 9 times out of 10? And Dasha, this might, by the way, not be true for you, okay? But 9 times out of 10, I find that those people are in the way somehow. They're in that healing channel themselves versus literally stepping back and seeing that energy channel between themselves and a client as being just a highway for source frequency. When we're working with people and doing energy healing on them, we have to stay out of that work. It's not us doing it. We're not doing anything really other than holding really the space for it to happen, right? And calling in energy or directing energy, but you are not the energy. If you're getting overwhelmed, you might be in that channel. And how do you change that? Acknowledge, create, visualize, like step back, right? Sometimes when I'm working on a client, especially if I'm working on something very intense, I will hold the tool out of my own energy field, or I'll place the wand on the floor and step back, and so the energy is flowing, but I'm not part of that field. Because if anything's coming through your body, it's going to drain you. So I hope that's helpful for you. And if it's not, let me know and I'll come back to it next month. Stephanie Kolb, she said, I've been thinking about something, curious to know your thoughts. My mom's a double Virgo. She had my brother and I. Neither him or I are doubles. As far as those 3 placements go, then I had my 3 children, and 2 and 3 are doubles. My middle daughter is a Libra sun and rising. My youngest daughter is a Leo moon and rising. My question is, do you think it's random or do you think it could be generational? Yeah. It's not a ridiculous question. She's like, hopefully it's not a ridiculous question. Anything's possible. I don't put too much stake in the doubles thing. As a, I don't make meaning of it myself in my own work. Some people do, so I'm not saying it's wrong. Just for me, I've never really made a meaning of double. People with doubles, though, tend to be, they're basically doubling down on whatever that energy is, right? So there's an intensity to those personalities. And is it possible that intense personalities are connected or attracted to each other in family webs? Sure. I mean, that's why I'm saying I think anything is possible. Marty Hoover asked, my question is about gridding for others. I wasn't aware in early February that we should ask for permission. I built my grid. I've been placing names next to it or now under it. As people request prayer and holding space, should I dismantle it? If you've been putting the names of people there who are requesting prayer and space holding, then I think you have their permission. Unless I'm misunderstanding Marty. She said, is that enough of a collective intention that I can leave it? Yeah, I mean, for me, it is. If you're going around and just going through the phone book and starting to write people's names down and sticking them on your grid, which I don't think you're doing because that would be kind of weird, then I think Houston we have a problem, right? But if people are asking for people to hold space for them, and you write their name down and put it under your on your prayer altar, me personally, I don't see a problem with it. So I hope that's helpful for you. Sissy asked, do you think that crystal grids or quartz points should be kept away from electric devices for avoiding amplification of the EMF radiation? And also, should crystal grids be kept in distance from each other or from other crystals? I don't worry about it too much, and I'll tell you why. First of all, there's EMF everywhere, right? So the idea that we can keep things away or things are not being affected, I think, is inaccurate, my 2 cents. I also don't think you have to keep crystal grids away from each other. Crystals want to connect with each other. They're always seeking that connection. I believe they connect with each other whether we facilitate that or not. I'll go so far as to say, because I believe we have a very intelligent creator that designed this planet with a certain magnificent measure of intention. I believe your crystals are already communicating with each other in the earth. So the idea that that house somehow stops because they're in your house now? Interesting, isn't it? Great question. And then Brandy asked, she said, oh man, I hope I'm not too late. The question I wanted to ask is in regards to Bagua versus Feng Shui. I'm still unsure of how to set my house and property up to establish the flow. My house is a rectangle. The front door faces west. The bedroom's on the left side of the house, which is the north. Oh, I see where you're going. Yeah, Brandy, I probably wasn't as clear as I needed to be in our class, but what I was trying to express is the way I do this is from my front door on that map, I look at my space as that map. So I don't do it based on the direction, like west is the ocean here in LA, right? So I don't reorient my whole house to that. I look at my house as the block and the front door as where my planning begins. Does that make sense? Now you can, and there are people who do base it on the physical, literal directions, on the compass, right? And so then you just have to adjust for that. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I'm glad you asked. And she said, I'd also love thoughts on painting a north purple if you have the time. Yeah, sure, why not? I love that so much. What great questions, you guys. I appreciate them so much. I hope my answers were helpful and useful to you. If you'd like to ask a question, make sure you look for the post that Alexis places in our Facebook group. I would love to be able to respond to a question for you next month as well. In the meantime, have a great rest of June until we get to that point. We start to collect these answers around the end of the month, and then I record at the top of the next month for you. On we go. Thanks, everybody.